Hey there, Yeshi here from Yeshi Jackson Fine Art, and I'd love to invite you to join me while we paint this really fun, super simple mountain sunset. All right, let's do it. Okay, I've got my palette of colors. Today we're using yellow, orange, purple, blue, black, and white. I've got my 3 brushes, my little detail brush, my big topped oval wash brush, and a trusty filbert brush. That's what we'll be starting with. Got a little bit of water to wash my brushes out and a couple paper towels for drying them. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to dip my brush in the water first, put a little bit of water on my palette next to the yellow paint, and mix a tiny speck of yellow paint into that water. So I've got some yellow tinted water here. And we'll draw a grid on the canvas. I want to divide it into thirds, roughly. So I'm checking my measurements using my brush handle, just pinching my brush handle where it reaches that first dot and then seeing if they're close. If they're close, you can just kind of go with it. We're not looking for perfection here, just trying to divide it up fairly evenly. And we're going to divide it into thirds vertically as well. Again, starting with a couple little dots up there. And then you can check, pinching your brush handle at the end. Ooh, a little bit off there. I'm going to wipe those ones off and get them a little bit wider apart. How's that? That's a little better. Again, we don't need it to be perfect, but we want to get it, fairly close. Okay. So we've got our little grid to get started. Now, we're going to come up into this top space here, the top third, and I want to draw 2 lines across. They're going to go all the way across the canvas from left to right. And I want them to roughly divide this top space into thirds again. So I'll start with a couple dots on the edge. Maybe put a couple dots on this side too. Again, we're kind of just estimating it, but if you want to check and see that you're exact, you can pinch your brush handle where it meets that first dot and then see that you're got them even. And then we're going to connect those dots just with some straight-ish lines. I say straight-ish because we're not robots and we're not using rulers or anything like that. We're just painting some lines, trying to get them kind of straight. So there we go. Got our first couple lines on there. And you'll continue to just dip your brush in the water, put the water on your palette, and add a little tiny bit of yellow water as we're going along this first step. Okay? I'm using mostly water with a little tiny bit of paint in it, just for this first stage. Okay, so we've got our first 2 lines across the top. Now in this center section here, I want to come to my right hand reference line, and I'm going to put a dot about a third of the way down. And then in the center of this right hand box, I'll put a dot just right out there in the middle of it there. Make that a little bit darker so you can see those dots a little bit more easily. All right, now we're going to draw a straight-ish line from this dot all the way to the left-hand edge of the canvas. So all the way across there. And then we'll connect it down to that other dot. So this dot should be below that one. Have a little bit of a downward slope on the end of that. Okay, here we go. Our next point of reference here, our next little dot, is going to be, again, in this center section, we're going to be along our left-hand reference line, and you're going to go about halfway between this line we just painted and the reference line down here. So about a third of the way up that box. Let me make that dot a little bit darker for you. Okay, and then we'll come down to the very bottom section here, and along our right-hand reference line, I want to come about a third of the way up from the very bottom, approximately. All right, now I'm going to connect some lines. Let's connect these 2 dots together first of all. And then from this dot, I'm going to come down to the very bottom right-hand corner. Okay. And then from this dot up here, I'm just going to go across to the left-hand edge of the canvas. Again, with sort of a straight-ish line. All right, so that's going to be the sort of the placement of our two mountain peaks. And then this is going to be our cloud that comes across. And this is basically all we need to get started putting the color on there. So I'm going to take my filbert brush, give it a quick rinse, wipe it on my old paper towel there, and set it aside. And next we'll want to use our big oval mop brush. This is like got a very big top, useful for filling in large areas like we're going to do right now. So to start, I want to load it up with plenty of white paint. Okay, really got a lot on there. And let's start with the very top section. So from the very top of the canvas down to this first reference line, I'm going to fill that in with white paint. Now you don't need to lay it on too thick, but you want to make sure that whole area is covered. All right, now real quick, well, we've got that paint wet up there. Let's take our filbert brush, the one we were just using, and get a little bit of that blue on there. Okay, just got a little bit of that blue on my brush. I'm going to go across the top of that little section we just filled in. So mixing it right into the white paint. Just adding a little bit of blue. And then I'm going to let my brush strokes kind of overlap as they come down so that it sort of fades from blue to that white. All right, so let's take that filbert brush, give it a little wipe, a little rinse. Set that one aside again. And we'll go back to our big topped brush, which again just has the white paint on it. And now let's load up even more white paint. And we'll skip this little section right here, this next section down. So we're coming to this section that is, 2/3 of the way down that first box. And again, I'm going to fill that in. Again, I'm skipping this little middle section of that top row of boxes. So I'm filling in now with the white paint. And I'm going to go all the way down, covering up this reference line. And in fact, I'm going to fill in the whole canvas from this part where I just started all the way down to here, but I'm going to go around my mountaintop line and this other mountaintop line, okay? So I'm filling in this whole section, covering up these reference lines. I'm going around this line that we painted there, so I know where the top of my mountain is going to be. I'm going all the way down to that bottom right corner. Again, covering up these reference lines. And I'm going to leave this section here. That's going to be a really dark mountain. So don't fill in this part with white yet. We're just going to go from this line here down to this line here and skipping this line here. That's the top of that mountain. Okay, so I've got that all filled in just with white. And now I want to add some more color to that. So I'm going to use the same brush. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to the brush. Still got the white on there, but I'm adding a little bit of yellow. And I want to add some horizontal lines that are just going to be like sort of the tops of clouds as they kind of float in between the mountains here. So you can just start with a couple of straight lines like this, kind of out in the middle of that space. And let's go even with the bottom edge of this line that we have here for our mountaintop. Add a little bit of yellow right there. And then maybe down in this section here, let's add a couple of more of those lines. So we're starting by just adding the color. And then I'm going to take my brush, wipe it off just a little bit. Okay, so I've wiped my brush off. I haven't really rinsed it or cleaned it that much, but I'm wiping it off. And now I want to soften these lines. So because we have the wet white paint underneath and we just added the yellow, we should be able to take this brush that's kind of not 100% clean, but doesn't have much paint on it at all, and just sort of smooth the yellow out into the white a little bit. We just want to get rid of any of those hard edges. So we have some soft sort of yellow fading into the white. Now you don't want to blend it all out completely. I still want to see some lines there, but I want them to be soft lines like we've got right here. Okay? Now let's go ahead and set this brush aside. Maybe give it a quick wipe. I like to wipe it before I rinse it. So wipe it, give it a rinse, and then wipe it again. That helps keep your water cleaner for longer. So I'll set that one aside. And now I'm going to pick up my Filbert brush again. That's this long-handled guy here. Let's see. Actually, you know what? I'm going to use that one again. I'm going to go ahead and keep using our oval mop brush. And I want to fill in this cloud up here. Okay, so that one's going to be a purple cloud. So I'm going to mix a little bit of white with some of my purple paint here. About half and half, maybe actually a little bit more white than purple. I don't want it to be too dark of a cloud. So we got that color going. Now I'm just going to fill in this blank stripe that we left there. Let's step across here. And just go all the way to the edge on both ends of it, so the top and the bottom. Go all the way up to the blue and white at the top. And then all the way to where the white starts below it. Okay, so we got that purple stripe filled in. Now let's set that brush aside and pick up our Filbert brush. And now I want to get a little bit darker purple on there. So I'm going to, again, mix the purple and white, but I'm going to make more purple. I'm going to mix more purple in there so it's a little bit of a darker purple color using this Filbert brush. And I want to go across the top of my cloud bank there and give it some fluffy top shapes. So it's fun to be kind of a little bit random with it, make some sort of smaller ones and then some bigger ones. And just work your way all the way across. You can go a little bit taller, but I'm kind of generally following the line there. And again, some will be smaller, some will be bigger. It's fun to have some variation like that. And then I'll switch back to my brush that has a lighter purple on it and just blend out sort of the bottom of that dark purple line I put across the top. So now we have clouds that have sort of a darker shadow on the top edge. That's what we want. All right, so that's good for those clouds for now. We might add a little bit more color to those in a minute, but let's rinse these brushes out. So again, I'm going to wipe the brush first, then rinse it in my water and wipe it again. And we'll do the same thing with our Filbert brush. Give it a quick wipe first, then rinse it out with the water and wipe it again. Now, let's start working on our mountains. So let's go to the mountain right here. This is the long line that we drew in the beginning that kind of comes across straight and then comes down a little bit. Now what we want to do is give that a treetop shape. So for the tops of trees, I like to start simple and then I'll add with my little detail brush, I'll add the little branches coming off. So I want to go ahead and go back to the purple color that I was using. So let's go ahead and get some even darker now. So I'm almost going completely just purple now. Little tiny bit of white maybe. Actually helps it cover a little bit better. But mostly just purple. And I want to come across this line that we painted, and I'm just going to give it some sort of up and down little triangle shapes. And again, I want to make some variation here, so I'm going to have some of them be a little bit taller, some of them not as tall. If you want to have a couple of rounded trees in there, you know, some oak trees or something, that's cool. And we're just going to go all the way down, kind of the bottom of that line, And that's our start. Okay, so we've got the general shape of the trees there. Let's make them a little bit darker. Just going to go over them again. Add a little bit more paint there. All right. That's looking pretty good. And now I want this to sort of fade out. So I'm going to take my clean brush here, my oval mop brush that doesn't have any paint on it. And I'd like this to fade from the purple through to an orange color and then fade out into that white and yellow. So I'm going to take my oval wash brush or oval mop. I'm going to put a little bit of orange. Let's get a little bit of white and mix it with the orange. So a little bit of white, a little bit of orange. There we go, it's a nice color. And I'm just going to come right across the bottom of this mountaintop shape. And I want to blend out those trees, so I'm going to go up as much as I can without destroying the shapes that I've got there. Just going to work my way across like that. There we go. It's looking pretty good. And now let's make it fade out even more at the bottom. So I'll take this brush and just give it a quick wipe. And then a rinse. Okay, so we've got white and yellow kind of surrounding that mountain. Let's get a little bit more white and yellow on our brush. Just mixing a little bit of white and yellow together. I'm going to go across the bottom of that orange that we just put on there. There we go. Now we've got it fading out from that purple, nice hard edge through the orange into the yellow and white. So let's set that one aside and grab our little detail brush. Just a little round brush. And this time we'll put some purple on there. No need to add any white because we want it to be nice and dark. And I'm going to go across the top of these trees and add just some little branches. So I like to just kind of start within the tree shape and just go out to the side. And you can play around with this. You can, give it a little tall top. Spread the branches out. But essentially we're just going to work our way across all of these little treetops, giving them that texture. One of the things you always want to think about while you're painting anything natural like trees and mountains is that you want some variation. Not every tree is the same shape. So you want, just as I painted these triangle shapes a little bit taller and shorter than each other, I want to make sure while I'm putting the branches on there that I don't do it all in exactly the same way. So sometimes I'm going to have more branches than other times. You can even put a little treetop that's kind of not really attached to the shape below. Add some branches that, sometimes there's a thin branch and then a cluster of leaves out there, so you don't really see the whole branch. But anyway, play around with it. It's nice to have that kind of variation. And then here where I've got the oak trees, I'm just going to add a little bit more variation to that fluffy round top shape that I've got there. And working my way across, just adding branches to these last couple of trees here. There we go. I think that'll work. Okay, so let's rinse our little detail brush out. Give it a little wipe. And we're going to go ahead and work on our main mountain down here. So this one is going to be done in black paint. So it's going to stand out even more than our purple mountain did. I'm going to take this brush that has the purple on it, my filbert brush, and give it a little wipe. Quick rinse and another wipe so it's clean and ready to go. Now, I'm going to use my black paint. Black paint's always kind of scary when you're working with all these bright colors, but don't worry about it. We're just going to go for it. We're going to do sort of the same thing that we did along this mountaintop. Of course, we got a more dramatic hill coming down, but it's the same essential method, which is to follow the line that we have there, but give it some treetop shapes. So just following that line, give it some sort of triangular treetop shapes, and then as I work my way down the hill here, again playing with the variation, having some come up real tall, some not as tall, and go all the way down to that bottom edge. There we go. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill in this whole area now with the black paint. Now as I'm filling this in, I actually want to spread it pretty thin because I want this to dry out, and then we're going to add some texture on top using our orange paint. But it'll stand out more if this is dry first. So I'm going to go ahead and spread that paint out as I'm putting it on there. I want to cover this whole area, but do it in a way that leaves it pretty thin so it'll dry out. That's one of the great things about acrylic paint, is that if you want to add another layer of paint, all you have to do is spread out the layer you're working on pretty thin, and you can add your next layer pretty shortly after, and it won't blend in. It'll stand out on top. There we go. Cool. So again, I've got it kind of spread out as thin as I can get it while still covering that whole area. Now I'll take my filbert brush that I've been working with and give it a quick rinse. Let's wipe it off first and then give it a rinse. And we'll wipe it off again. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and clean my oval mop brush, giving that a wipe first, and a good rinse, and then wiping it again. Okay, so while we're waiting for all of this to dry, let's go up and add a little bit of color to these clouds up here. So we started with just sort of a flat purple, made it a little bit darker on top, but let's add some color to the bottom. Because anytime you got a sunset going on, the clouds are going to light up from the bottom side, which is a really cool effect. So what I want to do is get some orange. Get some orange on my brush. A little bit of white is okay, but mostly just orange. And I want to go across the bottom edge of these clouds that we got there with that nice bright orange. There we go. And you can kind of overlap your brush strokes and fade out that orange into the purple if you want. It's a nice little effect. And then let's go ahead and add a little bit more white. And again, using the orange, but a little bit of white mixed into it. And then sort of come across the center of these clouds with a couple of lines. And you can see I didn't connect it all the way across. I like to kind of break it up a little bit when I'm doing this sort of texturing. And let's add a little bit more white to the brush. Still using the orange, but way more white on it now. And then come across the bottom of those little orange clouds we put across the front. We can even come across the bottom of this big cloud, sort of help that fade out, using a little more white. All right, that's pretty good. Now we can add a couple more orange clouds. We can come out in here. Let's again use plenty of white, but a little bit of orange. And just add some horizontal lines. They're not perfectly straight, but sort of flat. And you can even add those little puffy tops if you want to do that. Make them look even more like clouds. That's nice. like that. So let's put that brush aside. Grab our little detail brush. Where did I put it? Here it is. And let's come across the top of this mountain and add some branches to our trees. So using my little detail brush, getting some black paint on there. And again, just sort of playing around with some variation. Some of these are going to have little tall tops. Some of them are just going to be like a little bit more bushy. And I'm going to move pretty quickly, but you can take your time and play around with this part as much as you want. Again, the idea is just to create plenty of texture across the top here. Let's add like a treetop that's just a skinny little one. Add on its own. That's nice. Just for something a little bit different. And we're going to have some skinny ones and some bushy ones. Let's make this one a tall, skinny one too. It's one of the great things about painting is you can really just do each part of it however you feel. So if you feel like you want your trees to be all bushy trees, you can make them all bushy trees. If you want them all to be tall and skinny, you can do that. I like to play around with it and have some of each. Some crazy branches on some of these. Again, I'm just using black paint on my brush, just trying to create some texture here. Let's add another tall, skinny one here, little crazy top. All right, that's fun. Cool. I'll go ahead and give this brush a rinse. And it looks like I still got a little bit of time before that's going to dry. So let's do this. Let's come up to the top of our purple trees. And let's make those even a little bit darker so they stand out from the background that much more. So because this is mostly dry already, and if yours isn't dry, you can just wait a little bit before you do this. But mine's pretty dry, so I'm going to go ahead and just add more purple to my brush. And just come across the top and just make these treetops a little bit darker. Just to have a little bit more contrast. Now I want to be careful not to bring the dark color too far down because I like how this is fading out. So I'm just going to stick to the very tops here. But I might add, you know, another little skinny tree sticking out there. Again, just play around with it. You know, you get to do whatever you want. It's fun to have a little bit more texture. Now, if there's any of these supplies that I'm using that you don't have, I'll have some links below the video. So just go ahead and check out those links. I order most of my supplies from Blick Art Materials. That's blickart.com. And again, I'll have links to specific items down below the video there. I'm really laying on the paint pretty thick right now because I want to create that nice bold silhouette. Keeping the dark color towards the top of these trees so that my color fade isn't affected by what I'm doing right now. Just adding texture to the very top. a little bit more back down here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now I'm guessing that the black paint on this mountain in the forefront is probably dry enough that we can go ahead and texture it, so let's go for it. First of all, I'm going to clean my brush, get all the dark purple paint off of there, wiping it, rinsing it, wiping it again. All right, so we have this dark mountain here, and I want to create more texture, more trees coming down it, and I'm going to do that all with some orange paint. I'm going to add a little tiny bit of white, but it's going to be mostly orange. Now, when we did these mountains, the background silhouette, we started with some triangle shapes and then created all our branches. This time, we're not going to start with triangle shapes. We're just going to start with the top of the tree, make a little point there, and then I'm going to just do the branch shapes. So you can see what I'm doing here is just creating sort of the outside of a tree where the branches would be lighting up from the sun without creating a big heavy triangle. So I want to come down a little bit from the top. Doesn't matter, it doesn't have to line up with the other trees. It's actually better if you create some kind of variation there. So a little bit down from the top, and then sort of randomly work your way down what you would imagine to be the outer edge of a tree. And just let it fade out as you go down. Let's add a few more here. I'm going to go a little bit higher this time, right up near the top. And you can see I'm moving kind of quickly. I'm not worrying about, making any of these lines straight or even. They're trees. They're not supposed to be. What I do want them to be is a little bit brighter at the top, and then sort of let that fade out as you go down. So another thing we can do is sort of have another top of a tree sticking out behind one that's already there. Helps create a little bit more depth. And let's go down a little bit lower. Again, just sort of working my way down one edge of the tree. And then starting at the top again, working my way down what I want to be the other edge of the tree. And this is really starting to create more depth in the painting, which is what we want. Now, if we want to be, some of these kind of round topped like oak trees down in here, we just create the sort of rounded top. Look like that. And another great thing about painting sometimes is you just have to suggest. You don't have to really paint a whole oak tree. If you just do a little bit of a rounded top like that, and you've looked at enough mountains during a sunset, your mind will say, oh, that's an oak tree right there. And then behind it, let's do another, a redwood or a pine or fir tree, whatever you want it to be. And I'm just kind of working my way all the way down here. This one's going to go all the way to the bottom edge of the canvas. Make that a little bit brighter up here. Okay, we're getting really close, aren't we? Let's add a couple more over here on this end. So this time I'll do a kind of a bigger one. I'm going to start here, kind of right in the center of this whole mountain area. Nice bright orange top. I'm going to work my way down, and I want this one to go all the way off the edge of the canvas. So again, if your black paint isn't dry, you can just wait a little while. Acrylic paint does dry pretty quickly, so if it's not dry now, go ahead and eat a sandwich or something and come back in half an hour. I'm going to tuck another one in here behind this guy. Again, I'm using orange paint with just a little bit of white. And let's see, let's put another big one here. Start right about there. And this one, once again, I'm just going to have it come all the way down off the edge of the canvas. You can see I'm just kind of bouncing my brush around on the canvas. I don't want to have any really solid lines. Let's have another one of those rounded oak tree tops kind of coming across there. There we go. Maybe another little part of one right there. That's looking pretty good. Let's see, any more? Do we need any more? Let's put one more right about here. Coming off the edge of the canvas, then tucking in behind this other guy. All right, pretty nice. Well, I'm going to go ahead and call that good for now. I hope you've enjoyed painting along with me in this mountain sunset, and we'll do another one soon. Okay, thanks for joining me.